Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Mathew Weaver Jr.? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the disappearance, then offer my analysis. Mathew Weaver Jr. was born on April 2, 1997, and grew up in Simi Valley, California. This is part of the greater Los Angeles area. His parents separated when he was young, and Mathew was raised by his father, Mathew Weaver Sr. Mathew's father married a woman named Brooke when Mathew was young. As Mathew grew older, he ran into some difficulties with relationships. At one point, he moved to New York with a romantic interest. It didn't work out. It's not exactly clear what happened, but it sounds like he was having trouble finding stability. He ended up moving back to California and living in his grandmother's residence. Mathew was a big fan of animals and rescued a dog that he cared for some time. In 2018, when Mathew was 21 years old, he broke up with his girlfriend. His behavior became more erratic after this. He was using drugs and alcohol, missing work, and spending a lot of time partying. In April, Mathew moved into an apartment in Granada Hills, which is about 18 miles west of Simi Valley. In the summer, Mathew started working on power lines for the same place where his father worked. Now moving to the timeline of the disappearance. On August 9, 2018, at around 6 p.m., Mathew drove to his place of employment to pick up $400 in cash from his boss. This was part of his pay. After this, Mathew drove to his father's residence. He asked his father if he could see his pistol. Mathew took a photograph of the pistol and posted it on Snapchat. The caption read, "Game over." Mathew told his father that he had a new girlfriend named Melissa and he was going to pick her up. He left his father's residence at about 9:28 p.m. Mathew picked up Melissa, they went to a Walmart, a gas station, and then, allegedly, Mathew purchased cocaine and marijuana. They drove around for a while and partied. Mathew parked his vehicle in front of Melissa's residence and they talked. Mathew became extremely emotional during the conversation. He was crying and talking about how he was not happy with his life. Melissa would later describe this encounter as awkward because she really didn't know Mathew that well. So here we see that Mathew told his father that Melissa was his girlfriend, but Melissa's point of view appears to be somewhat different. Mathew dropped off Melissa at 5 a.m., now on August 10. In order to get back to his apartment in Granada Hills, Mathew should have driven east, but instead he drove south toward the Santa Monica Mountains. At 5:15 a.m., Mathew turned off of the 101 freeway in Calabasas onto Mulholland Highway. This is a rural area in the mountains. Mathew turned his BMW onto Stunt Road. He came to the intersection with Saddle Peak Road at 6:57 a.m. This is in Topanga Canyon and has a scenic lookout. Not far from this area, there is an access road protected by a metal gate. The gate is normally locked, but at this time it was not. Mathew was able to open the gate and drive onto the access road. This was about 7:15 a.m. Mathew's vehicle was captured on a surveillance camera covering this area of the access road. His vehicle was the only one on the road at that time. As Mathew continued to drive on the access road, it became increasingly difficult to navigate. The road eventually turns from asphalt to dirt and is not suitable for a motor vehicle. The road is winding, right next to steep drop-offs, and becomes too narrow to drive on. Mathew had no way to turn his BMW around, although he probably knew that. He was familiar with the area. He had traveled to the various scenic overlooks in the Santa Monica Mountains several times in the past. Eventually, Mathew's BMW became blocked by a small boulder, and one of his tires was hanging over the edge of the mountain. He was not able to drive any farther. At 8:10 a.m., Mathew called his father, but there was no answer. At 11:48 a.m., Mathew called Melissa. She didn't answer the phone, but she did text him back indicating that she was at work, and she asked what he needed. At 11:50 a.m., Mathew responded by writing, quote, "like some crazy going on, blank going on," unquote. 3 minutes later, he sent another text message saying, quote, "I just to talk while I have the chance." It looks like he was missing the word wanted, like he was trying to say, "I just wanted to talk." After this text message, Mathew turned his phone off, or the battery ran out of power. Melissa replied at 12:54 p.m. and at 4:25 p.m., asking if he was okay, but she did not receive a response. The next day, August 11, at 1:11 a.m., hikers in that area called 911. They reported hearing a male and a female calling for help. The police investigated. They did not find anyone in distress, but they did find Mathew's BMW. The police and volunteers searched for Mathew, but they were not successful. A few months later, a baseball cap matching the description of one that Mathew was wearing was found in the area, as well as a torn-up T-shirt that may have been his. The police tested blood on the T-shirt, but said the test was inconclusive. On January 27, 2019, a hiker found the key to Mathew's BMW. It was 75 feet from where his vehicle had been stuck. On September 7, 2020, at about 8:21 p.m., the police responded to the town of Silmar after getting a report of a stolen car. When they arrived, Mathew's father, Mathew Weaver Sr., opened fire on them. The police abandoned their cruisers and took cover. None of the officers were struck. Mathew Weaver Sr. exploited this opportunity to climb into one of the police vehicles and play with the lights. He then wandered into a drainage ditch. At 12:03 a.m., now on September 8, Mathew Weaver Sr. was taken into custody after dozens of police officers were sent to the area. Some people believe that Mathew's father may have suffered from some mental health symptoms due to the stress of his son's disappearance. He was upset about the police response in looking for his son. He didn't think the police took the case seriously. It looks like the police made up for it through their massive police response to arrest him. I guess he was successful at getting their attention. Now moving to my analysis. Let's take a look at the major theories about what happened to Mathew Weaver Jr. Theory number one is that Mathew ran off to start a new life. This seems pretty unlikely considering what he was doing right before he disappeared. Mathew was in a disorganized state, not prepared for some type of sophisticated journey to start a new life. He had difficulty managing in his normal life. He was not conscientious enough to successfully adopt a new identity. In addition, he didn't take all the things that he would have needed, including his motor vehicle. Theory number two is that Mathew was murdered by bad actors, not people like Megan Fox or Ashton Kutcher. Rather, I'm talking about perpetrators, perhaps those involved with drugs like Mathew was. The term bad actor gets confusing when talking about the Los Angeles area. This theory is supported by Mathew's strong desire to obtain a firearm. Maybe he wanted a gun for protection. Perhaps he asked to take a picture of his father's pistol and posted it on social media in order to intimidate people who were trying to kill him. Mathew asked his father if he could have a gun, borrow a gun, or if his father would buy a gun for him. Mathew's father refused every request. Mathew had also tried to obtain a firearm from a friend several months before he disappeared. Another factor supporting this theory is the report from the hikers talking about hearing a man and a woman screaming for help. This theory is contradicted by the video surveillance on the access road where Mathew's BMW was found. His vehicle was the only one that entered the area at around that time. I suppose the killer could have parked some distance away and hiked into that area, but that would have been a lot of work, and most gang members don't specialize in hiking. I've heard of biker gangs before, but never hiker gangs. In addition, how would the gang members have known where to find Mathew? Theory number three is that Mathew died in the mountains either because he brought an end to his own life or from something like exposure. There is quite a bit of evidence to support this theory. Mathew's desire to obtain a firearm supports this theory better than it supports theory number two, the homicide theory. Mathew desperately wanted a firearm so he could use it on himself. That's what he meant by putting the caption "Game Over" on the social media post with the image of his father's handgun. In his mind, the game that was over was his own existence. Mathew was extremely emotional and crying not long before he disappeared. His last text message, the one about wanting to talk while he had a chance, could be interpreted as indicating Mathew would no longer be around to communicate. Mathew had a history of using LSD, cocaine, marijuana, and alcohol. He admitted that he had a substance use problem. He was missing work and generally not functioning well. On the night he went missing, he had allegedly used cocaine and marijuana. Both of these drugs are associated with paranoia, especially cocaine. Perhaps Mathew obtained a firearm because he was paranoid, but either way, this still supports the theory that no one else was involved in his death. In addition to being paranoid, Mathew may have been psychotic. Perhaps this explains why he drove off into the mountains. According to some of Mathew's friends, he had sustained a head injury a few days before he disappeared. This could also explain his erratic behavior. When considering all the evidence, how would I rank these theories from most to least probable? I think the most likely theory is number 3. Mathew is dead, and no one else was involved in his death. The most probable version of this theory is that Mathew brought an end to his own life. After that, I would go with the version where he died from exposure. Mathew could have made it pretty far on foot and hid himself somewhere before he died. The next most probable theory would be number 2, someone murdered Mathew. The least likely theory would be theory number 1, Mathew ran off to start a new life. I'm moving to my final thoughts. When people use excessive quantities of substances, they often find themselves in denial. They cannot admit to themselves or recognize that they have a problem. Interestingly, in this case, Mathew did recognize that he had a substance use problem. He was not in denial, at least about this part of his life. I think his substance use may have been in response to emotions he could not handle, like breaking up with his girlfriend. The substances temporarily relieved the pain, but soon after, as is always the case with substances, they caused more permanent trouble than they temporarily alleviated. Even though Mathew was not in denial, it is possible that some people who cared for him were in denial about the cause of his disappearance. They just could not believe that someone whose life was spiraling out of control would wander into the mountains with the intent of dying. Perhaps Mathew's final lesson for society is a reminder about the dangers of substance use, a pervasive and life-destroying enemy that has no mercy or compassion and never tires. Those are my thoughts in the case of Mathew Weaver Jr. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.